You're not even late.
Oh, good. I'm glad I'm here.
You made it.
I wore my dress to match your background.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. It's good to see you.
How's everyone? Michelle, JP?
Nice to see you.
Hi.
Doing good this morning. I love your background. It's so nice.
Thank you. It's a really ugly window, so it's a screen.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's an old brick building. It's not even pretty brick. It's like the puke yellow brick.
Oh.
So the
I
lady,
love how it like moves like that. That's so great. Yeah, it looks very like an elegant background.
I know. It's like installed. Is that installed or is it
we put it on sliding tracks so that they wouldn't fall over. Hi, Alyssa.
Hi, it's great to see everyone.
yeah, it's really good. We have like a solid group of people coming today, around 11 people. So that's good. I'm excited about it.
Exciting stuff.
Just the right size.
I apologize. I'm doing intermittent fasting and this is my break time. So I'm just going to start my cereal. I didn't just wake up.
Please don't let us stop you from the one time a day you're allowed to eat.
It's okay. I'm on the West Coast, so it's like we did just wake up not that long ago. It was only a few hours ago.
Yeah, JP's on the West Coast too.
Yeah.
Where are you guys?
Los Angeles. I'm in Los Angeles.
Nice. I'm
And
in
you
the
guys?
same time zone, straight up north. So I'm on the west coast of Vancouver, just outside of Vancouver, on the Sunshine Coast. Yeah.
Nice.
The Sunshine Coast.
Yeah, but I'm actually in Vancouver right now, which is where I'm in my brother's recording studio at his house because I'm speaking on a stage in person tomorrow. So
Wow. Is it your first in-person event?
first in-person one since 2020 when I was in San Diego. I did 3 events in a row and then left, and that was it. Have not been in the US since then. Have not been on a plane since then. Have not been on a live stage since then.
Wow. Well, my husband, for the first time since 2020, is in the city for a late night cocktail party work event that they flew people in from all over the country for. I'm like, what is this, 2020? Like, we should all be in our pajamas still, I feel.
Right. Got quite comfy being on the Zoom stages, right? From our pajamas.
Yeah, definitely. Business up top, party down below. Well, hi Trish.
Hello. Good to meet everybody. Good to see you, Alyssa.
Yeah, good to see you too, Trish.
Right, here we come. This is impressive. Hi, Julie. Hi, Corey. Do we say Corey? Is that right?
It's Corey. Yeah.
Okay. I was like, I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna just go for it. And I was right. Hooray. Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
This is great. So we're probably waiting on just a couple more people. So maybe we can just start by kind of just going around to the people who aren't Alyssa, myself, and Michelle, and just sort of hear where you are, what you're doing, what brought you here. Like if you already have a burning question that you for sure want us to talk about, we can. But just why don't we start with JP, who's right next to me on my Brady Bunch boxes.
Okay. Hi, my name is JP San Pedro, the only man in this situation, which I'm wondering why. Did I miss the all-female review of it? Anyways, yeah, JP San Pedro. I work with Amanda. She is my coach, and I work with men. That's my thing. My whole thing is it's called the Silverback Yogi, Peaceful Savage. I'm trying to bring some peace to men, as myself went through some radical changes in my life. So I work only with men, which is extremely hard because they don't want to do any of this work. So I'm here to learn from you ladies on how to communicate that with them. I really, really, really want to start a podcast. It's down there in my list of things to do as I'm organizing right now, but it's definitely something in my radar. So I want to learn. So that's what I'm here for.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine, you're next in the box.
I'm happy to follow JP because I work with a lot of men too, and I have to rephrase a lot of things to make it safe to get executive coaching and psychotherapy, which is what I do. My specialty is working with leaders going through transition or crisis. And I have some leaders who I do guided visualizations and breath work with and mindfulness work. And when they're in the saddle and the shit's hitting the fan, they want to hear my voice and I'm not always available. So I'm kind of using this not to do a podcast, but to see how can I record, what's the process, what tools do I need, so I can offer them my voice when I'm not in session.
Oh, I love that. Very
Oh,
cool.
yeah, that sounds like great for like a private podcast too, right?
Mm.
Get private access to you through that. Yeah, I love that.
That's a very cool idea. I hadn't heard about those before until someone invited me to a private podcast recently. And I was like, how did you convince Apple to do this? That's very cool. Trish, you're next on my box.
Hello. Yeah, I'm here just to explore. I'm figuring out all the different kinds of content I want to do, and do I want to double down on a formal podcast, or do I want to do YouTube videos? And I have developed a framework called the Four Forces Framework, and there's a larger context for that called non-ordinary, and the idea of creating a skill-based community where people have we're not really taught how to collaborate or how to be in community in a way that gets our deeper needs met. So a combination of supporting leaders in developing non-ordinary skills, evolving edge skills to create their version of the new paradigm that they're offering or their vision of what's possible in the world. And at the same time, also using that framework as a operating system that allows leaders and paradigm shifters to also get support and community and amplification with each other in a new way.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah.
Trish was my second podcast episode, or my second guest on my podcast after the illustrious.
And I've, worked with both Alyssa and Amanda and love them both. So I'm very happy to be here too and
Gosh, I'm
supporting
gonna have to
them.
have you on my podcast too then.
Yeah,
I would.
that's a great idea.
I would love that. Yeah, I was very honored to be on both Alyssa and Amanda's podcasts. So
That's why your name is familiar. I'm like, I know I've listened to an episode with you.
All right, Julie Ellis, you're next on my Brady Bunch boxes here.
Hello. Hi, I'm Julie. I have a book that I wrote that's coming out on June 7th, and met Amanda through our daily writing group. And I am in the process of trying to get interviewed on a lot of podcasts. And also, one of the ideas I have about the book launch is that I interviewed about 20 women who are all included in my book, all their stories. And so the idea of doing some kind of like interview that would live on with like a live interview to accompany the book, and that there's a whole series there, and that once I make my way through the ones I already interviewed, there's like an infinite number of other women who are doing cool things that I could continue. And so, how's the best way of doing that? So this was sort of timely for me because I've always been like, I don't want to do a podcast. So, and now I'm like, maybe I want to do a podcast. So here I am.
All right, very cool. I love
Like
that.
book number 2 right there, right? Season 2, book 2.
Yeah.
That's very cool. All right, Corey, tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. So I am in New York City. I work predominantly with adults with anxiety, OCD, panic, depression, some substance abuse. And I have been, over COVID, I think, spent so much time listening to podcasts. And I got a little bit involved with a podcast that I love, just kind of behind the scenes, talking about editing, a little bit of editing a podcast, and working on ideas and host notes and things like that. And I know nothing about what happens more behind the scenes. And I'm not necessarily sure that I myself want to start a podcast, but I like the sort of idea of thinking about in the future, maybe joining up with someone who's part of it already, so I'm not doing all of the grunt work. And just figured this was great. I would love to understand more about the other nuts and bolts that go behind the scenes.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for coming. Jill Cohen, who are you? Long time no see.
I know. I'm a grief counselor in New York City. That's all I do is grief counseling. I believe that nobody should have to grieve alone because we're never taught how to do it, and we don't know how, and we don't know if it's normal. And everybody goes through it at some point, and it's a really sacred time in people's lives where they're pretty much alone on it. So, and I don't have a podcast. I listen to podcasts sometimes.
So you're just here to get a good sense.
Yeah, I want to see what they're about.
Mm.
And why, if I did one, why would I want to do it
Mm-hmm.
too? I mean, is it that important that I share? I don't know. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. I love it. Good. All right, Michelle, hello.
Hi.
Oh, we got two Michelles. Michelle Weber, tell us about you.
That's crazy.
Wait, there's three Michelles. It's a Michelle show. Michelle Weber.
Hi. I'm in LA. I've been doing this for a long time. I have a mindfulness-based practice, and I have people of all ages. I have a 14-year-old who tells me she loves working with me. I'm her peer.
Mm-hmm.
I have people in their 60s. I do a lot of couples work. I see a lot of women in therapy. And I recently did a couple of wonderful things. I did last year a video shoot with a young rapper named Trippie Redd because I study acting and I was the expert therapist. So that was on TikTok and YouTube. I also did a radio show for a woman named Michelle Cohen right after Joe Dispenza was on. I love this stuff. I love acting. I love presenting. I also did a film, guys, for Roxy Sorkin, Aaron's daughter, and that will be coming out in the spring and will be premiering at Tribeca.
Oh,
so I'm doing what I love. I love my practice, and I love doing this acting as an avocation. I have to do my practice so I can eat. I don't think acting is, I'm not Meryl Streep, so I don't think I'm going to make enough money to, I would absolutely love to start doing podcasts. People tell me I need to. And I would love to, follow the steps along the way. And I've done a lot of presentations on compassion fatigue. I'm also an addiction specialist. I started a program for pregnant addicts and their babies on the East Coast, and that was written up. So I have a lot of stuff I can talk about and present. Yeah. I've run a lot of programs for mental health and substance abuse as well. I will share with you that I'm virtual now totally. And the isolation has been real hard for me.
Yeah.
Real hard. I miss my beautiful office. I don't miss the LA traffic, but it's been very isolating. So I'm doing a lot of stuff on Zoom. I'm doing a lot of stuff with Inside LA, a lot of meditation, but it's been very hard because I'm an extrovert. I don't need to be out all the time, but plus I got COVID and I did everything right. Yeah. N95 mask, triple vax. So I'm still fighting the repercussions of that. I'm sorry. I know I've talked a lot.
Oh, no, you're fine. I think one of the questions that I gave these ladies is like, what's one of the joys of podcasting? And I have to say, deep connection with the person you're talking to. So podcasting might be a really interesting way to battle some of that for sure. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that.
I love this kind of stuff. I love just being in this group with a bunch of people who are doing similar work. I also ran a center on death and dying and bereavement at Yale many years ago. So I work with grief as well. I'm very eclectic. I'm probably the oldest person in the group. I've done it all. I've seen it all.
Well, we're glad that you're here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Michelle Arpin-Bagina, the last of the three Michelles. Tell us.
Hi, everybody. Michelle Weber, please PM me privately on where you got those rocking eyeglasses, because I have a thing for eyewear myself. Hi, everybody. I'm Michelle Arpin-Bagina. I actually met Amanda. This is a little bit of a rabbit hole of a story. I got Brene Brown's email letting me know that her podcast, coincidentally, was going to be on Spotify. So I went to Spotify to make sure I would sign up and get that podcast, and then fell down the Spotify rabbit hole and found Amanda's TEDx short and watched it. Googled her. She's in New Jersey. I'm in New Jersey. The rest is history. Amanda and I have been working together for probably about a year now. And I love collaborating. The process of talking out loud with a thought partner, which I think really coincides with, I think what a great podcast is collaborating with a thought partner on a conversation about a topic that you both and their audience really care about.
Yeah.
The topic that I really care about is teaching people how to talk about money.
Mhm.
We're just told it's taboo. You shouldn't talk about it. We're not actually taught how to talk about it. And I actually think we can learn this in a really constructive way. And I feel like there's a really, really big opening. I've been podcasting as a guest for close to 2 years now, a really concerted effort to get on podcasts, to build an audience, to talk about this topic. And I don't know if I'll start a podcast. It feels pretty daunting of an idea right now to do it. One of the things I'm working on is getting my book published. And what intrigues me is potentially doing a limited series podcast around the topic of my book, and finding maybe speakers who resonate with different topics in my chapters, something like that. And I'm really open to just learn from everybody here today.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that's actually a really good segue to the little bit of speaking that myself and Alyssa and Michelle are going to do. We're holding ourselves to 5 minutes, which for you, anybody who knows me, is like quite hard. I'm going to do my best. I'm literally going to look at my clock, make sure I keep to 5 minutes, because I want to be sure that we have the full second half of our time together for you to ask literally any question that you have about the process of developing the podcast, the technology of it. Michelle Abraham has great experience putting people on podcasts. So we're here to answer any questions that you have. So I'm going to start because I have the least to say, I'm sure, because my podcast, as you all know, maybe is only 8 episodes old. So it's a baby podcast. And I'm delighted when I see that 25 people have listened to an episode in 24 hours. I'm like, oh, 25 people. Yeah. So I'm still very much in the naive, like, excitement of it all. And the way that I came, I've been sort of, my friend here, Alyssa, was my podcast host, and she's been a longtime friend. And she and I had been talking about starting a podcast, but it was like a podcast, and that was the title of it. I didn't have like a heart and a soul and like a purpose to it. And then when I was writing my book over the summer, starting in May and then running through the whole summer, I was writing a book about my time management practices, and sort of out almost like a crop circle, right? Like aliens came and like imprinted great work on my brain. And I was like captivated. Great work. What is that? I said to myself, I guess. And then I was like, had all these ideas and all these thoughts, and they were not all fitting in the book. It had a big impact on the book. The book's now called Great Work: How to Do What Matters Most Without Sacrificing Everything Else. But it still is a book about literally how to do this. It's still very much about time management. So I had all these extra questions. And then suddenly it wasn't just the podcast that I would start someday, but instead unleashing your great work. And once it had a title, which took some effort on behalf of myself and Trish and Alyssa, like angst-filled brainstorming around what the title of it would be. The topic of it came together pretty quickly. I think because I blogged for years and years and years and decades, right? So when you figure out how to blog, you kind of know how to write a single point. And I just write podcast scripts that are basically blogs, but I think about how to share those ideas more conversationally. So I wasn't really daunted by the content creation side of it at all, but I was very uneducated, like fully unaware of how you get a podcast on the radio, is how I talked about it. Like, how? So at first I thought maybe I would just hand it off to someone, but there was something about the mystery behind it that it wouldn't let me go. I needed to know how to do it myself. So I actually did do my entire podcast, the first 3 episodes myself. I hosted it on Buzzsprout, which I have to say, if you do think you want to kind of do it yourself podcast, Buzzsprout walks you through step by step how to get your podcast listed on all the places. You say, I want to start a podcast, and Buzzsprout says, step 1, continue. Step 2, continue. By the end, your podcast is on Apple Podcasts. It was remarkable. I thought it was going to be really hard. It was not.
I'm sorry, who tells you how to do it? I missed.
Buzzsprout. And I'm going to put links in the chat because I'm going to give you every exact thing that I did. And then I bought music from Ben Sound, royalty-free music from Ben Sound. Now you can get free stuff. I paid like $20 for a song that I laid down, and then I spoke into iMovie, because that's what I had, to do my intro, my sponsored message, and my outro. And I like put them on top of each other and called that intro and outro music. And then recorded myself into iMovie, edited it myself, which I knew how to do already because I edit videos. And then you just drag the file. It's inexplicably easy. I just dragged the file onto Buzzsprout. I chose their thing called magical mastering, which like makes it so that if one person's loud and the other person's soft, it just equalizes them. And I had a podcast. And then since then, it's been, you know, a lot of learning around being really consistent with a podcast, because it is kind of an overwhelming task list. But, and for that reason, I just recently decided I am going to hand off all the stuff I now know how to do. I feel good handing it off, because if I ever need to take it back, I can. I'm not like stuck. So that's been my baby podcast journey. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And like I said, as soon as Alyssa starts talking, I'll drop links into the exact things that I used. I used what I had. I had this blue snowball and I used it for my podcast and it was fine. Yeah, so that's my experience. Alyssa, we'll just go through all three of us and then we'll open it to questions. And if you have questions, put them in the chat. Alyssa, do you want to share with us your experience 1.5 years into your podcast?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to. It's great to see everyone and meet and see some new faces. So I am Alyssa. I'm a psychologist turned intuitive business coach and have known some of the people on here for quite a while. So it's awesome to see you guys. So I started my podcast in August of 2020. And it felt like something that was kind of just nagging at me for a while, you know, that kind of urge to share in a different way. And I love speaking. I love presenting, and I have a lot of thoughts and opinions about things. So the podcast for me was also a way to like get my thoughts together and hone my perspective in my kind of sphere of business coaching, what I was doing. So it really gave me an opportunity, I felt like, to get clearer on my own messaging. What do I care about? What do I actually have opinions on? What do I want to share, be known for, and kind of build a little house around? So that ended up helping me then figure out other pieces of content, right? What I talk about in my emails, what I share on other people's podcasts. So it helped me really kind of anchor into clarifying who I was and how I was a little bit different than others. I always have a ton of ideas and probably more than I know what to do with. So it gave me like a space to actually explore some of them, see which one had more oomph to it, see which ones people actually listened to, enjoyed. It gave me a way to really understand too what people were interested in hearing more about, who were in my audience. So that was helpful. And I just wanted an outlet to like share my thoughts, stories, experiences, and really, I think, to connect with other people who resonated. So whether that be potential clients who resonated, or people who were just needing some support in their area. Michelle, I just saw a question come in. What are my topics? Well, I have 1.5 years of topics, so there's a lot of them. But the overarching theme, at least when I started, was to help service-based business owners, like primarily coaches, therapists, wellness entrepreneurs, to do some outside of the box things. So to expand beyond the therapy room, to use their skills in a different way, to really embrace being innovative and different and not having to do everything the way that it's been done before. So that expanded a little bit into talking to other service-based entrepreneurs about the same thing, really, how to really embrace and find your own uniqueness, mindset pieces that come up as we're building a business on that journey. What are the behind the scenes things we need to do to that are not strategic to keep our business growing? And then how to stay kind of true to ourselves and in that unique space as we're growing our business. So that's really what I'm talking about now. And I wasn't really interested in doing a series of videos. I just felt like there's something really comforting about just sitting behind a computer screen and only recording audio in my sweatshirt and pajamas in my closet. So it was just a really nice informal way to share. And one of the things that I loved about it that I actually didn't realize I was going to love as much was the interviews. I love interviewing people. I love asking questions and like really getting into understanding someone else and their own story and giving them a place to share that and connecting with other people. I still have relationships with people who are on my podcast. It gives me an opportunity to reach out and connect with other people and invite them on. So I loved that aspect of it. I think that was incredibly helpful, and they've taught me a lot, and hopefully have helped my audience grow as well. So to me, there was a lot of benefit. It is a lot of work to create the content, to stay on a schedule, but I organize it in a big giant spreadsheet and I write my content ideas. I write when my interviews are going to be, I batch things, and it kind of moves along without a whole lot of extra planning and effort on my part. And I use Audacity to record my podcast episodes, my solo episodes. I use Zoom to record my interview episodes. And I have a mic that I don't even remember what it's called, but it's like I don't know, it's a fancy mic. It's on the floor in my closet. And I actually haven't used it for my last few episodes because I'm like 9 months pregnant and I can't get on the floor anymore where the microphone is. So I just gave up on that. Eventually I will bring it back out. But yeah, it's been a really great experience. And I think one of the things that made it kind of all drop into place for me a little bit too was having the people who were reaching out to me to do work together were really aligned with who I was, with my approach, because they had already heard me. They already kind of knew what I was about. They would sometimes like repeat back to me things I said, which like, I didn't even remember sometimes, but it was just great to have the experience of like, oh, it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's like building a runway for me so that people have already heard me. They know me a little, they know what I'm about, and people who aren't interested, go find another podcast. But like the people who are and want to take that next step, they already have that foundational awareness of who I am. So to me, that was just like a really lovely benefit of it.
That's great. And Alyssa is the opposite of me in that I think still doesn't know how her podcast gets up on Apple Podcasts. She's like, I thought, why don't they do something? Because you had somebody who did it for you, right? From the very beginning.
Yeah, I didn't care at all. I wanted to not know on purpose because there's so many things that you're juggling as a business owner. I was like, I don't have the time, energy, or mental space to spend learning about how to get my podcast up, learning about how to edit audio. I just didn't care. I've DIY'd my website, my email systems, my online courses, and I was like, I'm done. So I found a person right out of the gate to take all of that away. And all I do essentially for my podcast is I script it, I record it, and I drop it into a Trello board. And it appears on all the places where podcasts go. My show notes, I edit after they take the initial first draft of them. I do create the graphic and send it out to my guests, but it's just like a really easy process that fits into my schedule where I can stay in the realm of like content creator and thinker about the topic instead of like toiling away behind the scenes, which I probably would have stopped, honestly, if I had to do that for my podcast.
Yeah, definitely. Which brings us a great segue actually to Michelle Abraham, who is not only a veteran podcaster herself, but is a podcast manager for 67 podcasts or something like that. Michelle, tell us a little bit about your path.
Sure. Yeah. So thanks so much, Amanda, for having me here, guys. So fun. I love hearing Amanda and Alyssa's journey, and your guys' perspective is so great. Amanda's very modest, you guys. Her podcast is top 10% of all podcasts out there already, even after 8 episodes. So That's amazing. I don't even know if that you know that, Amanda. It is amazing. Yeah, that's out of 2.7 million podcasts, which is awesome. So I started podcasting when I became a new mom, and I had a really busy business before, and I turned on the Apple TV, and I was like, my business brain had gone to mush. So as a new mom, I love being a new mom, but I was like, oh, my business brain, I need some more motivation, inspiration. As I turned on Apple TV, and I was playing with my son on the floor one day, and I saw this purple app, and this little purple app, I turned it on, and I found this show called The Eventual Millionaire by Jamie Tardy. And it was awesome. I listened to like every episode. I felt like I could run up and give Jamie a big hug at a conference. Like I felt like I knew her, just like Alyssa was saying, like, you're bringing your listeners on a journey. They feel like they know you, right? So when they come to work with you, they're like already totally ready to work with you. And I was just like, this is amazing. I love this. And then I'm like, it's in my car too. I can listen to my car, and then I can listen while I'm going for a walk. So I put my son in the stroller, and we go for a walk. And every Monday I'd wait for that episode to drop. She didn't drop it. I would have been so upset. Like, thankfully she was consistent and produced her episode every week. So I took my son for a walk, and I just started feeling better over time. And I'm like, wow, this has had a huge impact on me as a listener. Why is no one talking about it? I'd ask my mom friends, what podcast do you guys listen to? They're like, what the hell's a podcast? And so this was in 2012. This was a little bit before podcasting became popular, and I just loved it. So when I got back into work, I opened a co-working space, did a lot of digital marketing and online courses and funnels and all sorts of things for people. But podcasts kept coming up. I started a Vancouver podcasters meetup group, and I wanted to learn as much as I could about podcasting. There wasn't very many people I could find that could come in and speak. So I started learning it. Soon enough, I started helping other people do their podcasts. Meanwhile, my own podcasting journey took a little bit of a different route. I got imposter syndrome. I don't know what topic I want to talk about. I'm like, oh, I got commitment issues. Like, I don't know if I can stick with the topic for long enough to have a podcast. I got fear of like people listening, or too many people listening, or no one's going to listen. I got 4 years later. Meanwhile, I'd launched about 10 or 12 other people's podcasts. I finally launched my own. But guys, now I know why I had to go through all that. It was because that is exactly what I see all of our clients go through now in that kind of like wave of like before launching a podcast, that overwhelm, the unclear, uncertainty and clarity. So that's really what I did. And I realized what I really wanted to talk about was the power of podcasting and helping people, because I was seeing these transformations in people using podcasts. So I launched a show called Amplify You finally. And Amplify You has two different aspects to it. One, it's called Ask the Expert interviews. So I get to interview amazing experts who will help people with podcasting, whether it's a voice coach or a book author coach that can help you figure out how to put your podcast into a book. So those are all the people I interview with the audience in mind, people who wanting to start podcasts. The other type of interviews I do on that show is called a Behind the Mic, where I get to interview podcasters about their journey, how it was for them starting, just like we're doing today. So those are two types of interviews I do on my show. Now, it's interesting because my business, Amplify You, while I got started on my podcast and helping others, I realized that our uniqueness is our content creation. That's our zone of genius as podcasters. And so we should really stay there. And what I was noticing is that no one else wanted to figure out all the technology stuff. So I started a business, right? We learned how to do the technology. We got really good at it. So my business, Amplify You, now is launched over 300 shows. We manage about 65 podcasts a week. All within the one specific space. Is entrepreneurs who have a big message that's going to change the world, make an impact on people. Those are the people we work with. And so now we have podcasters launch their show, but stay in that zone of genius. And then they can go on to having their show. So I eventually launched my show and loved it. Do all the interviews. Biggest struggle for me, my own solo shows. And actually 141 episodes in on that show, I don't have a lot of my own solo shows. So I'm actually launching a new show that's more my thought leadership, because I kind of got lost in all the interviews. I love the interviews. I just love meeting people, and the power of having a podcast for networking purposes and leveraging businesses that move the huge needle on my business. That's what's helped our business grow. So for me, I love helping other people see also the power of podcasting. Everyone in the podcasting world is so focused on download numbers, but it's actually, yes, those are amazing. The people that come to you are ready to work with you and excited. But what's really exciting and my favorite part about podcasting is the relationships and the people that you meet. I know Alyssa and Amanda have already said that, but it's the power of the relationships that have really been the door opener for a lot of things in my business and also in my life personally. And I have a second podcast called Blissful Parenting that I purely do for selfish reasons. I become a better parent after hundreds of episodes of listening to parenting experts talk. So for that one myself, that one I do that for my own, and there's no business strategy around it other than the fact that Blissful Parenting is not my company. I was asked to host it, and I just love it because I get so much personal growth and personal development from it. So that's a little bit of podcasting from my world.
So does that mean that you're going to be personally doing 3 podcasts soon? Your own thought leadership, your Amplify You, and the Blissful Parenting? Is that what it was?
Blissful Parenting, yeah. Yep, absolutely. The more podcasts, the better. That's how I don't spend any money on marketing. This is how we grow our business.
Wow.
I join masterminds and I also do podcasting, and I love it. And so there's no need for paid ads. There's no need for other things. Our business has grown really well because of that strategies.
That's great. Thank you, guys. So we already have some questions coming in on the chat. I'm going to take a look over here, but you should also feel free to just pop your questions in now. We're in the question session. Catherine is asking Alyssa, can you explore the idea or like maybe the dichotomy of I need to have it all figured out versus having enough of a theme and then rapid prototyping?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I mean, I don't know if there's ever a time where I feel like I'll have it all figured out. So I felt like I had enough to share and to share even around things I didn't know. This is what I'm weighing right now. This is what I'm trying to sort out. These are things that are still on my radar that I'm working through. So being able, I think, to like weave in like lessons that I've learned in different experiences, as well as content and expertise that you want to share, I think can be a really nice blend where you don't feel like you have to be teaching content all the time, but also sharing your own experiences and stories and things that you're kind of working through. And maybe your thought process evolves on something as you go through the course of your podcast, which feels totally human and natural as people follow your journey. And I know mine has, even kind of the focus has changed a bit in my podcast. So I would just sort of embrace where you are and start there and let that grow and evolve with you.
Yeah, that's something Alyssa was always pointing to me too, because I like to overcomplicate things. So I'm like, let me write, for example, the second episode of my podcast is this like treatment of Jim Henson, which I still listen to sometimes when I'm just like, I miss him because I have real feelings for Jim Henson. So, but that was a complicated, like I went on a trip there and I took like pictures and I was like rereading all the books and it was like a whole thing. And Alyssa was like, that's great. But also you could tell them 3 things you learned by getting up this morning a little earlier than you had before. And I haven't yet made that podcast episode, but I think the idea of just like sharing where you're at is also really powerful, because sometimes people pick up that stuff and ask you about it later and you're like, oh, that's what you wanted. So that's interesting. Michelle, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I love that so much because I think really that's how people get to like, know, and trust you so much through the power of podcasting. It's because you're sharing vulnerably, openly, authentically. There's no faking it till you can make it in podcasts, because there's the reason there's so many shows that start off out of the gates really strong and then they fade out after about 10 or 12 episodes is because they're not flexible and they can't flow just like that, where they feel like it has to be rigid. So there's so much personal growth that happens as a podcast host too, that naturally your podcast is going to evolve, and also your content, maybe you might get more clarity as you're going through podcasting, and that's totally okay. We're getting so many people come to us now that need to relaunch their show because it was started off over here and it went way over here after 20 episodes. And that's totally fine. That's a great break for a new season or a new, new way of doing it. And I love Alyssa's idea, like, think of like sharing your thought process and sharing about how you get to an idea, or sharing one small topic per episode is perfect. Love it.
Yeah. Plus then your episodes are shorter, and I have 15-minute episodes and Alyssa does too. In fact, I have a 7-minute episode coming out, which is a real victory for me. And people like that. Like they mention how short the episodes are. It's bite-sized. I love it. Great.
Yeah. Intentional, right? Like intentional piece of content rather than rambling for an hour.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So Catherine is asking another question here about book writing and how, like, what your question boils down to, Catherine, is who owns the content. So that's one of the reasons why, like, I self-published my book without question. I didn't even look for a publisher because I wanted complete control so I can use it however I want to. If somebody buys your book, they own your book and they're paying you royalties for basically writing it for them. And so then they can control what you're allowed to do with it and how sometimes you can negotiate how you're allowed to use the name. But your podcast is owned by you. So you may have to negotiate the name with the publisher if you're getting a publisher to publish your book, or you'd have to put it under your name and then you can promote the book. Most publishers really want you to promote the book however you can, so they should be fine with you having a podcast too. But the podcast is yours, you own it. So you can use it, you can repopulate using your transcriptions for the content of the book. So starting place. Yeah. All right.
The other way around too, where you use your podcast to develop the content for your book, and thinking of like each episode or series of 4 or 5 episodes as a chapter. It's a really great way actually to get your book out. And don't worry about the content being the same on the podcast as it is in the written content. People are gonna pick up on that, and they're not gonna not buy the book because it's on the podcast. We work with tons and tons of authors, so podcast is great for when you have a book or to help you create the book. When you have a book, it's great to go on other podcasts and share your book. When you're writing a book, it's great to kind of use the podcast to get some of the book out. When I first started podcasting, the first podcast I did was because of a summit. So I was doing a summit, and at the same time I had a podcast. I was doing a podcast interview with them, and then publishing it as a summit. And then at the end of that, we wrapped it up and put it into an ebook. So we did all 3 at the same time. And it was great because the podcast then funded the recording sales of the summit. And it was all in the RV space because I wanted to take my family on an RV trip and I knew nothing about it. So set out to do a summit to learn about RVing, and it ended up doing so well that it bought us the RV. And then we spent 6 months traveling around.
Wow.
So that was the first podcast we did called RV There Yet. It was a lot of fun.
RV There Yet. That's great. Very cool. So Michelle Weber's asking what's a mastermind. That's so Michelle Abraham mentioned that she joins masterminds as a business building strategy. Basically, it's like somebody who hosts a group of people who are learning from them. And then the people, actually Michelle and I are in a podcast or in a mastermind together. As a matter of fact, that's how I met her. And it's just, you learn from the person, but the real benefit of most masterminds is in the other people in the group. Yeah. So what other questions do you guys have? Feel free to just pop off your mic. Happy to answer anything.
And Amanda, if we can, kind of what we're doing right now is kind of like a mastermind kind of format, actually.
It is kind of, yeah. Yeah.
How do you get people to find your podcasts?
Indeed. So I think Michelle, actually, maybe you should answer. I mean, I post it on social media. That's basically the end of it. And I send it to my list of people. So if you don't yet have your list of people kind of organized, it's harder because really the most people most likely to take a chance on your podcast are the people who already kind of like what you have to say, think you're interesting, maybe wanted to work with you in the past, but like it wasn't the right time or whatever. And then it gives them, they're really willing to take a risk on your podcast and listen to it. And then hopefully they start sharing about it. But
would you send it to your clients?
Yeah, I send it to everyone. Everyone on my list hears about the podcast episodes.
Okay.
And I post twice a week on my social media platforms for each episode. One that's like a standard, the new episode has dropped, and one that's a little bit more fun. This week it's, I really wanted to do a WWF wrestling video, but I didn't have the time because this week's episode is hustle versus resilience. And I wanted it to be like an epic rap battle. So I did what I could with the image to make it look kind of, edgy. People seem to like the second one better as far as social posts go. But Michelle or Alyssa, actually, Alyssa has a lot of people listen to her podcast too. How'd you do that?
Alyssa, I'll let you go first.
Sure, and I probably don't know as much around the strategy as Michelle is going to share, but I just kind of took it with me everywhere. I put it in my email signature. I shared it with my list. When I was on other people's podcasts as a guest, I would, share my own podcast. Most of my kind of free downloads or free quizzes or whatever freebie structure I have points people to the podcast at some point in it if they want to learn more or get to know me a little better. So I'm kind of always like directing people there from different channels and different places. But that's essentially what I've done. I do post on social media too, just once a week to announce the new episodes that have come out. I also have the people who are guests share with their people. So I think that helps to bring in new listeners.
What social media posts particularly do you use? That's for anyone.
I use Instagram. Is that what you mean?
Mm-hmm. But don't you have to have photos with Instagram? So
yeah, I create a graphic in Canva that I just recycle. Like every podcast episode kind of looks the same to keep it consistent. I just changed the image in there, but everything else, like what episode number it is, what the title is, it all looks the same, so that people can kind of follow that easily.
One tip Alyssa gave me that I instituted at the beginning and has, I think, made a really big difference is when you book somebody on your podcast, they agree to share it and you tell them how to share it. Like, I'll send you an image, you need to post it once on your social media on the day the episode drops, and you need to send it to your list at some point in the week. And people are willing to do basically anything if it's clear to them what exactly you're asking them to do. They won't think of it themselves, but they will typically do it.
Amanda, what social media do you particularly use in addition to Instagram?
I use all of them somewhat ineffectively. I'm on Instagram, probably most of all. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn, and I am actually on Twitter, but I'm never on Twitter. So I use Buffer, which is a social media scheduling tool. And I post the same content across all 4 channels, with the exception of LinkedIn gets only about half of what I post because the rest of it isn't really LinkedIn appropriate. So Michelle, were you going to answer that?
Sure. Yeah. Exactly what both of these ladies have said is what we suggest you do for marketing. It's really funny. However technology based we are these days, it's really funny if you actually look, the actually number one way of marketing a podcast and growing a podcast is word of mouth, which I always find that really surprising. But it is some things that we've seen very helpful. Is like boosting your episode on Facebook, like for $5, boost that episode. And you can also tell your interviewee that you've boosted it as well, and really make sure they promote it. That's huge for growing your list. And that's actually the number one reason to have guests on your show. Not only you're building some great relationships, but also then they're going to help you promote and share your episode. So that's how you gain a lot of listeners. When you submit your show to the platforms, like you need to use a podcast hosting site. So like Amanda says, she used Buzzsprout. I use one called Captivate.fm. When you launch a show, you're going to get a piece of code called an RSS feed that then gets submitted to all the platforms. And when you submit your show to all the platforms, there's already millions of people on all of those platforms. So you're going to get naturally already some listeners just from that alone. But it's not enough to sustain a podcast. You still need to be the one marketing it out and sharing it. And because of the content of the podcast kind of takes away from having to do like an actual newsletter or like one of those weekly emails out to your list so you can share the podcast episode in those like Amanda was sharing. But those are all great ways of doing it. And the high level strategy around marketing your podcast is think about your audience. Where are they already visiting? Like, or what? So for example, we have some shows that will post their episodes on medium.com. So Medium is a platform that you can go in and paste a little bit of a show, your show notes and your link to your show there. There's already millions of people on medium.com. So where are your clients already? Where is your perfect listeners? Where are they hanging out? If whether it's in a Facebook group, go into a Facebook group with where they are. If a topic of your podcast comes up in relevant conversation on social media, post a link to it. Hey, actually, this is an awesome question. I actually answered this in a podcast episode. Here's the link to it. So lots of different ways that you can market it. We use we use LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram for our own podcast because that's where our audience is. But I would say 99% of the time I'm on Facebook. The podcast does go out to the other platforms, but Facebook's usually where I am because that's where most of my clients are.
That's great. So Catherine asked the question, how do you get booked on podcasts? Because I think one great way to get your podcast out there is to go be on other people's podcasts and mention it. And Michelle actually does that side of the business too, right?
Yeah, we do. We help people get booked on other podcasts, but there's so many great resources, guys. One of my favorites, actually, I'm doing an event this weekend on Saturday called Podapalooza, where you get to be interviewed on podcasts if you want to. We can talk about that later. But my co-host from that event, she runs something called Speakers Playhouse every Thursday morning from 10:30 to 12. And it's free to go to. And what's cool about it is that you get to take the stage as an expert and say your talk title and your audience and your name. And then there's also like a bunch of podcasters will go on the microphone and share the podcast that they're looking for guests, and you can connect with people that way. That's Speakers Playhouse, and that's on Thursdays. And then I also do one called Connect and Collaborate, which is on Wednesdays, where people can come as a guest and say, I'm looking to be on podcasts. And we have podcasters that come and say, I'm looking for guests. Those are great kind of matching service that way. I can put in the chat. There's a few other places where you can set up a profile and connect with people that way as well.
That's great. And if you want to, you can also pay somebody to do the work of finding. I know some of us have used podcast agents. Michelle, you are a podcast agent, or you have podcast agents on your staff or something?
Yeah, we do. We are considered a podcast agency, podcast booking agency as well. We have a handful of clients that we will then go in, like, for example, in our mastermind, the leader of our mastermind, James, booking him on 200 shows right now. So we are taking that person and we are creating some content that's going to be really relevant for podcasts. And then we're reaching out to all the podcasts to getting him booked on it. And then he gets scheduled, and then it's all done for him. So that is a done for you service that we do too. I do have some classes that we do teach on it too. If you want to do it yourself, I can teach you how to create that pitch and how to really get the attention, because we get hundreds. I'm sure you guys will start to notice, you'll start to get lots of emails about people wanting to be on your podcast. But if you open them up, it's like me. Nothing about how it can benefit the listeners of the podcast or the hosts or anything like that. So making sure that those emails are getting opened and read and received well to be booked then is what we help people do.
Michelle, Abraham, you did this RV thing, and you explained that you brought money in because of it. How does one get income from a podcast?
So most of the podcasting industry is going to tell you that you need to have lots of downloads and have advertising with sponsors and all that kind of stuff. That's like for the podcast. I believe that's open for anyone. Anyone can do that. The type of podcast that we work with, that both Alyssa and Amanda have as well, it's like more like we have our own businesses and our own products and services is really what we should be putting in as ads or sponsorship. Like Amanda, your Aligned Time Journal is the sponsor of the podcast. So that's really how you monetize a podcast for someone who has a business. And it should be your own products and services. You can put ads in the podcast. One way that we teach how to do that is really to bring people from your podcast to like a Facebook group or to an event or somewhere where then they can connect with you. And then we offer our programs from there. So in the RV example, how we were able to do that is I was selling recordings from the summit to do that, which was great. So selling summit recordings at the end of the podcast. Some people sell their book at the end of the podcast. Those are all sorts of different things that you can do, lots of different ideas. Yeah, but it's really more so about the where what's important to you in your business.
So a brief technical question: what are show notes and are they necessary? So show notes are the like underneath an episode on a podcast, there's some description in this week's episode, blah, blah, blah. That's what the show notes are. And you can put the links in there for your guests. And the reason it's mostly necessary is because it's your SEO. It's where you put your SEO keywords for search. So they are necessary. Although the system that Michelle uses embeds also the transcript. So then all your keywords are in your transcript also, which is good. That Captivate that she mentioned, we'll put it in the chat. You guys can save the chat. You should definitely save the chat. So lots of good links in there. So that's what a show note is. And then this question from Trish is basically about niching. The framework that she developed can be used in all these different ways. Does that mean all kinds of different podcasts? Or how do you handle sort of a big, broad, big idea? Trish, am I saying that right?
Yeah, I'm thinking in terms of, if you already know, you guys covered it, where when you're doing the podcast, you end up finding, oh, I might need to relaunch because there's a whole different topic or it's taken a different form. I already know there's a couple of different sort of channels, like relationships versus using it at work as an entrepreneur. So I would really love to have, I find that people sort of have, the people who are leaders also want the relationship stuff. So there is overlap there. Self relationships kind of applies in a broader context to the customer, but leaders is more of a specific. So where not everybody wants that application of it. So I didn't know if there was a way to do playlists or like within one podcast, then have subcategories where people can go, oh, I just want to subscribe to these podcasts, or if it really is like, oh, now I need to have 3 different podcasts. Thank you. Well,
one thing that Michelle Abraham mentioned that could be a good way to do it is she has different episode types. So,
right. So you can put that as the types.
Right, like Leader Express, or, like better names than that. So that way people can at least recognize if you're doing something very specific.
You do that under the same podcast, but you put them as like just label the episodes like beforehand of this. Okay.
Yeah, and Michelle, make sure you put a link to your podcast, because I don't think I did. I put Alyssa's, I put mine, but make sure you put yours in there too.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And we have only 3 minutes, and I want to ask for 2 things. One is, it makes a huge difference. I mean, nobody's business, changes everything. If any single person just goes onto the podcast app and rates the podcast and writes a review, it makes a huge difference. That means that Apple will then show it to more people in search. So if you guys wouldn't mind going in and rating Alyssa's podcast and rating Michelle's podcast, it makes a huge difference. And mine too, please. So that's one thing I really do hope that you'll do. And the other thing is, Podapalooza is this weekend and I'm doing it. And I think it's cool. Tell us what it is, because basically it's like, you want to be on podcasts, go do 5 podcast interviews this weekend, and have 5 podcast episodes under your belt. So, but Michelle, tell us your you explain it better than I do. So
Yeah, I can do a quick Coles Notes version of it. So Pot of Plays is an event that we do quarterly. It's happening on Saturday. It is a 12-hour day or 10-hour day. It's a lot of fun. It's 8 a.m. Pacific to 6 p.m. Pacific. And what happens is we have 40 podcasters that are featured podcasters. Those 40 podcasters interview a heck of a lot of people that day. So if you want to come and join, there's two different options. One, you could pay $1 and come to the main stage where there's tons of speakers talking about podcasting, all sorts of different things about podcasting, monetizing it, starting it, to all sorts of crazy things. And then if you would like to be a VIP, you can upgrade to VIP ticket and you get up to 5 interviews on podcasts that day. So you'll get to select all the podcasts you're interested in being on. And then those podcasters will agree to have you on them. And then we'll schedule you in. So sometimes you'll get between 1 and 5 podcasts that day, but then all the podcasters that you've selected will have your information. They can connect with you afterwards for further interviews too. It is a crazy day. And it's like, just to give you an example, like it's like $250 per show to get booked, like with most agencies on the low end. That's it's a $147 for 5 interviews. Pretty awesome. And it's a lot of fun. So check it out. Amanda's got a link for you.
yes, I will put the link. I will find it and put it in the chat here. So I want, for those of you who need to go, we have 1 minute. I want to thank you so much for coming. It was so lovely to see all your faces. I hope it was helpful and interesting and got you thinking.
I just want to know how to find your podcast so I can rate them. Do I just Google your names?
I will send you an email with exact links and maybe even a little tutorial about how, because sometimes it's like hard to figure out where you're supposed to put it.
Thank
So I will make it really easy for you to do that. Thank you so much, Michelle. It makes a really big difference.
So much. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And don't forget to click the little 3 dots next to whatever name it says and save the chat if you want the links that are in the chat. So I'm going to stop recording. Thank you guys so much for coming. It was lovely to see you.